It started as nothing. A bright, ordinary day in Maryland, the kind of day that usually disappears from memory the moment it ends. No signs, no expectations. He woke up without urgency, threw his metal detector into the back of his old SUV, and drove toward the river simply because he had done it before. Not for money, not for content, for silence, for the feeling that time could slow down if you walked far enough away from routine. The river greeted him with calm clarity, sunlight slicing through the surface and scattering across the stones below like broken glass. He stepped into the water carefully, feeling the cold rise past his ankles, then his knees, then his waist. The detector moved in slow, practiced arcs, tracing the riverbed with patience learned from dozens of empty days just like this one. The sounds were familiar and disappointing. Dull beeps, weak signals, reminders that most searches lead nowhere. Rusted nails, spent shell casings, pieces of forgotten metal with no story worth telling. Minutes passed, then more. His thoughts drifted, the world felt small and quiet, contained within the rhythm of water and sound. And then the tone changed. It wasn't loud or sharp. It was deep, dense, heavy, a sound that carried intention. He stopped moving, adjusted the detector, swept again. The same tone answered back, steady and unmistakable. His heart sped up, but he didn't rush. Experience had taught him that excitement often led to disappointment. Slowly, carefully, he bent down and pushed his hand into the cold silt. The mud closed around his fingers. Then he felt it. Something solid, smooth, and unexpectedly heavy. He pulled his hand free of the water, mud dripping between his fingers, and time hesitated. Resting in his palm was a watch. Scratched. Dirty. Weighty in a way cheap things never are. He wiped it once with his thumb, and then again. The dial emerged, the crown, the proportions. Recognition arrived before logic could intervene. Rolex, not cracked, not crushed. Real. For a brief moment, the river didn't exist anymore. There was only the watch, cold and silent in his hand, and the realization that this ordinary day had already become something else entirely. The first sound didn't belong to the river. A sharp crack echoed from the shore, wood breaking under sudden weight. He looked up instinctively, confusion crossing his face, the watch still clenched in his hand. Another sound followed, closer this time. He felt the air change the way it does right before something irreversible happens. Then the brush exploded with movement. A full-grown black bear burst from the dense trees lining the riverbank, powerful and fast, far closer than felt safe. Water splashed as it reached the edge of the river. His breath caught in his chest. His legs felt heavy, unresponsive. He stood waist-deep in water, metal detector in one hand, Rolex in the other, frozen between instinct and disbelief. Every survival reflex screamed at him to run, to move, to do something. But the water slowed him, and the bank felt impossibly far away. The bear stopped. It didn't charge. It didn't retreat. It watched him. The seconds stretched unnaturally, bending into something almost unreal. The world shrank to details, the sound of his own breathing, the faint hum of the detector, the ripple of water against his legs. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He barely moved. His mind emptied itself of thought, leaving only awareness. The bear's eyes stayed on him unreadable, then, without warning, it turned. It stepped back into the trees, its dark shape dissolving into branches and shadow as quickly as it had appeared. Silence rushed back in. His knees weakened. He waded slowly to shore, heart hammering, hands shaking, and collapsed onto the riverbank. Only then did he look down again at the watch, as if seeing it for the first time. Mud-streaked, heavy, impossible, real. In the span of a few minutes, he had found something valuable enough to change his life and come close enough to danger to lose it. The river returned to its calm, but nothing about the day felt ordinary anymore. He didn't speak about the river to anyone that day. Not on the drive home, not later that night, not even to himself in clear words. The story felt too fragile, as if saying it out loud might cause it to fall apart. Instead, he wrapped the watch carefully, drying it, cleaning only what was necessary, handling it with a respect that bordered on caution. Every red light on the road felt longer than usual. Every mile added weight to what sat beside him. At home, he barely slept. His mind replayed the signal from the detector, the cold pressure of mud around his fingers, the sound from the trees. By morning, he knew exactly where he was going. The watchmaker's shop was small and unassuming, filled with ticking sounds and soft light. The man behind the counter had seen thousands of watches, real, fake, restored, ruined. He took the watch without comment, examining it slowly, methodically, as if time itself slowed to match his movements. Tools appeared. Magnification, silence. The watch was opened, inspected, cleaned piece by piece. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. Finally, the watchmaker leaned back and nodded. Original Rolex, vintage, authentic. The scratches weren't damage, they were history. The water exposure hadn't killed it, it had preserved it. The movement still lived. As the watch was restored, its character emerged fully. A model collectors didn't chase for shine, but for survival. The watchmaker spoke about its era, about how pieces like this disappeared more often than they resurfaced. He spoke carefully, without exaggeration, because value like this didn't need noise. When the watch was returned to him, it felt heavier than before, not in mass, but in meaning. It was no longer just a find, it was proof. Proof that something forgotten could resurface intact. Proof that patience could be rewarded without warning. Proof that a quiet day could carry consequences that followed you home. He left the shop differently than he entered it, aware now that what he carried wasn't luck alone, but responsibility. Somewhere between the river and the ticking room, the watch had stopped being an object and become a turning point, one that demanded a decision whether he was ready or not. He didn't rush to sell it. Days passed, then weeks. The watch stayed with him, sometimes on the table, sometimes locked away, always present in his thoughts. He researched quietly, learning what collectors valued, which stories mattered, which details could change everything. He learned that watches like this didn't belong on open marketplaces. They moved differently, through private messages, discreet introductions, conversations that felt more like interviews than negotiations. Eventually a dealer agreed to connect him with a collector. The meeting took place in a quiet office, far from the river, far from the chaos that had delivered the watch into his life. The collector didn't smile when he saw it. He leaned forward, asked questions, wanted context, where it was found, how long it had been underwater, whether it had been altered. The watch was passed between hands with a care that bordered on reverence. There was no urgency, no excitement, just assessment. Numbers weren't spoken immediately. Instead, there was silence, broken only by careful remarks about condition, rarity, and the strange beauty of objects that survive where they shouldn't. When the offer finally came, it wasn't dramatic, it was calm, firm, final, the kind of number that doesn't need persuasion. He listened, nodded once, and felt something unexpected, not relief, not joy, but closure. Yet the transaction was clean, professional, almost anticlimactic. When the watch changed hands, the room didn't change, the world didn't react, yet something inside him shifted permanently. What had once been mud-covered and forgotten was now validated, transformed into certainty. He walked out with documents, numbers, and a quiet understanding that value isn't created in the moment of sale. It's revealed long before, when patience meets awareness and risk is faced without spectacle. After everything was finished, life didn't suddenly become louder or faster. There were no celebrations, no dramatic changes, no moment where everything felt different at once. The money arrived quietly, numbers on a screen replacing an object that had once rested in his hand. The Rolex sold for $27,400, enough to matter, enough to change certain things, not enough to rewrite his entire life, and that was exactly why the story stayed with him. What lingered wasn't the sale, but the sequence of moments that led there. The decision to go out that morning, the habit of showing up even when nothing usually happened, the patience to move slowly in cold water, the instinct to stop when the signal sounded different, and the fear, real physical fear, when the bear emerged and reminded him how thin the line was between luck and danger. He returned to the river weeks later, not to search, but to stand on the bank and listen. It looked the same, it felt the same, yet he knew it wasn't. Some places change only once and only for one person. He still uses the metal detector, still walks rivers and fields, but without expectation, because now he understands something most people never experience firsthand. Extraordinary outcomes rarely announce themselves. They arrive disguised as ordinary days, and if you're not present, really present, they pass without leaving a trace. The watch was gone, the money would eventually be spent, but the awareness remained. A quiet reminder that value hides where patience lives, and that sometimes the most important finds aren't what you pull from the ground, but what the moment pulls out of you. Thank you for listening to this story till the end. Leave your opinion about this story in the comments.